righty. Welcome, everyone. Yes, week one. So far, so interesting, huh? Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to our Sunday night live stream in regards to week one, giving ourselves a little bit of a review and kind of talk about the results as to what happened over the course of today and, this week thus far. Obviously, there's still a game tomorrow for Monday Night Football between the San Francisco 49ers, who will be taking on the New York Jets, but based on everything we witnessed, as a Rams fan, that is soul crushing to see the game end as such. But, with Puka Nacua going down, unbelievably unfortunate turn of events. There were a lot of unbelievably unfortunate turn of events as this week progressed. There's a lot of players who we drafted relatively highly that just took the day off. Really, what week one has become over the course of the last two seasons is the fourth preseason game. Like, no doubt about it. That is exactly what it has become. And just to give you some context as to exactly what I'm talking about, like, I went ahead and I statted it out earlier today because I'm watching the fantasy and I'm looking at all the scores and I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? No one is scoring points. Like, sure, there are the occasional, like Anthony Richardson, Josh Allen, monster games, Joe Mixon, Ramondre Stevenson, Aaron Jones, beautiful. But then I look, I'm like, where's Jonathan Taylor? Where's Chris Olave? Where's Drake London? Like, what is going on right now? So I statted it out accordingly, just to put this into perspective, right? So as of right now, based on how this game ended, so in week one, we have a total of 66 total offensive touchdowns in terms of passing and rushing touchdowns total. 66 in week one thus far. If you statted against the last 5 seasons of fantasy football week one, again, this is what I'm talking about in terms of the fourth preseason game. Now, last season, week one, there was a total of 61 total touchdowns scored. We're currently at 66, and we still have that Monday night game to play. But again, 2022 was 73, 2021 was 88, 2020 was 87, 2019 was 85. There is a huge downtick of overall touchdowns being scored in week one, unfortunately. I even went ahead and statted out the average passing yards per quarterback this week, 191 amongst all of the quarterbacks who have played this week. 191 average in terms of passing yards. The statistics are not there because no one's moving the ball. There's not enough touchdowns being scored because these defenses are just, quite frankly, locking up quarterbacks. The number one overall pick of the 2024 NFL draft had 93 passing yards today, guys. Anyway, over the course of today's live stream, I'm going to be ranting a little bit, but we're also going to be going ahead and talking about what we've witnessed, because there is a lot of major things that happened over the course of today that is really promising for our fantasy prospects. And there are some things that, of course, you may be panicking about, and I will try to talk you out of the panic that has ensued. Again, typically the first Monday after week one of the NFL season is called Overreaction Monday. We're trying not to overreact from the lack of performances from guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I want to go ahead and begin by talking about each individual matchup. If you guys have any questions, of course, we'll talk about them on an individual basis. But obviously, in this specific game between the LA Rams and the Detroit Lions, the first and foremost biggest piece of information is unfortunately Puka Nacua. And the fact that, of course, we don't know what exactly he is being diagnosed with in terms of his injury, but the fact that he did not return to the game speaks volumes. Again, his lack of a return leads me to believe that it's something that they're probably throwing him into an MRI machine to check out his knee. And considering it's a knee injury, again, we're hoping for something that is quick, easy. Maybe he's out for 2 to 3, 4 weeks at most. Let's hope it's nothing more than that, because if it is, for many of us, it's going to hurt. Now, obviously, Cooper Kupp in his absence looked like the Cooper Kupp of 2022, 2021. That's MVP Triple Crown winner Cooper Kupp on the field. And it's evident. Now, obviously, we don't know if he would have gotten 21 targets if Puka Nacua was on the field. Probably not. And they still would have both been highly relevant within the game. But again, in his absence, it's really just going to be a matter here. Let me actually look this up really quickly. Who were the stat leaders in terms of yardage through this offense? Okay, so obviously, Cooper Kupp. Tyler Johnson had that huge play of 60-plus yards. But then it was Colby Parkinson, Demarcus Robinson. Going forward, depending on how this injury looks, when we talk about waiver wires tomorrow on the Monday episode, a lot of these Rams guys are going to be mentioned, because in the absence of a Puka Nacua, there is a lot of potential volume available. Now, when we continue on with this Rams conversation, of course, Cooper Kupp played well. Matthew Stafford Could have had himself an additional touchdown if maybe the coin toss had gone in their direction, if they could have been a little bit cleaner in the red zone. Nonetheless, in this specific game, there was no signs of Blake Corum. For those of you who are Kyren Williams managers, rejoice. As a Rams fan, listen, I don't mind spending a third-round pick on a rookie running back, but I would have assumed that he would play more than Ronnie Rivers, which he didn't. This was the Kyren Williams show, and it's going to continue to be as such. He is the clear and away number one. And again, 18 total rushing attempts with 3 total receptions, 21 touches. He's the workhorse back. Now, we knew going into the given week, the Detroit Lions run-stop defense is the best in the league, and they demonstrated that again. Kyren only averaging 2.8 yards per carry is not a surprise. Really isn't a big deal. Now, when we flip onto the other side of this conversation, talk about the potential for the Detroit Lions. I see a lot of you in the chat already talking about it. Jameson Williams, his explosive performance of 5 catches, 121 and a touchdown last season in the NFL playoffs when we took on, when I say we, as in the LA Rams, when the Rams took on the Lions, Josh Reynolds, that number 2 receiver, was one of the biggest difference makers as to why the Lions won that game. And we did see very similar an absence of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta in clutch moments throughout that game. But Jameson Williams, we've heard it all offseason from the coaching staff. He's going to be utilized way more as we progress. Of course, I'm not worried about Laporta. I'm not worried about Amon-Ra. This just helps, Jameson Williams as a potential start going forward. David Montgomery was great. Jahmyr Gibbs was great. Obviously, we would have loved more touches for Jahmyr Gibbs. But, obviously when they're trying to run the ball up the gut, that is the David Montgomery role, as we have seen over the course of the last 2023 and thus far this season. Any questions in regards to this overall game? Because really, I think that's where it covers. Obviously, unfortunately, Jared Goff did nothing for us fantasy-wise. What did he have? 217 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown. This was supposed to be a higher scoring game of sorts. 26-20 isn't really where it had. Vegas had it at 52 in terms of a total. Definitely tough. But yeah, as of right now, I think that pretty much covers it. These defenses forcing turnovers are great, but this was a playoff game. This is really what it felt like. In terms of Amon-Ra, you may be concerned, but I mentioned it earlier on in the week in the wide receiver video. In the fourth quarter of that game against the LA Rams in the NFL playoffs of 2023, Amon-Ra had 1 target. What the Rams did to him in the second half of that game, they did to him here. They clamped down on him and they made sure that Jared Goff had to look elsewhere. And did that still hurt the Rams? Sure, because Jameson Williams had himself a great game. But, Amon-Ra is going to have these ups and downs games. But more often than not, about 80% of the time, he's going to be up and putting up huge performances. So if you find someone in your fantasy league that's overreacting and worried about him, I would probably suggest going out and asking if we want to go ahead and make a trade and pick him up, because that obviously would make a huge difference. Acquiring someone like Amon-Ra on someone that's overreacting, beautiful. We'll take it. Jake String sends in a super chat. Thank you, Jake. Says Patriots dub, Mondre RB1 this year. Trust. Listen, hold up. Let's take it easy. We'll get there when we get there. Ramondre looked great. Trust me. He had like 5 huge runs that pretty much were his entire workload of production today. But in terms of the Rams versus the Lions, we can come back in terms of talking about them at any moment if you guys have any questions regarding that. But let's move on to the next matchup, okay, that I wanted to talk about really quickly. Just my initial thoughts in regards to Pittsburgh versus Atlanta. Justin Fields, sure, he had his rushing opportunity, didn't score a touchdown. And the Steelers did not score an offensive touchdown. There is a potential in which maybe we want to go pick up Chris Boswell, 6 for 6 on field goals today. Obviously, a huge fantasy upside player in that circumstance. But in terms of the Pittsburgh offense, we anticipated this to be a run-first attack. They ran the ball 41 times today. 20 of them going in the direction of Najee Harris. Obviously, due to the lack of usage from Jaylen Warren, he is still beat up, and they were giving a lot of touches, not a lot, but equal amount of touches to Warren as they were to Cordero Patterson. So until Warren gets a full, healthy kind of thumbs up from their coaching staff, he really is probably going to be a lesser play going forward. Outside of that, in regards to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I know that Tomlin said that he wasn't going to name a starting quarterback going into week 2. He wants to wait and see what the deal is in regards to, obviously, Russell Wilson, the calf injury. Time will tell in regards to that. As for the other side of the ball, ultimately, the Pittsburgh Steelers were making Kirk Cousins' life a living hell. That defensive line, TJ Watt was after him the whole day. I think what they have, like 2 or 3 quarterback sacks, 7 or 8 quarterback hits. They had him pretty much scared the whole day. I mean, if it wasn't for that penalty, TJ Watt had a strip sack fumble recovered. The next play after that, because of the penalty, because he was offsides, obviously there was a Kyle Pitts touchdown, which for those of us who have obviously checked out the overall contributions from tight ends today, the tight end position did quite literally nothing this week. There were 3 tight ends this weekend in a half PPR that had over 10 fantasy points. Exactly 3. One of them, Kyle Pitts, the other, Isaiah Likely, and the last, Foster Moreau. That's week 1 for us, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. We had a super chat that came in from Serge who says, I have Amon-Ra, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jake Ferguson. Long story short, I lost. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Any words of encouragement? Listen, hold on. Let's really quickly. Jake Ferguson got injured, okay? So depending on how that injury is going to kind of transpire going forward, we're going to have to wait and see. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys drafted a tight end in the second round in 2023's NFL draft. He could certainly end up being a playmaker. I think it's Schumacher, if I'm not mistaken. He could be a playmaker if Ferguson's going to miss time, because we know that regardless of who's playing tight end for the Cowboys, there is value to be had there. Now, as for your Amon-Ra Harrison worries, Amon-Ra, again, he disappeared, so be it. Whatever. He's going to come back next week and put up 10 receptions. Don't even blink. As for Marvin Harrison Jr., I told you guys when the week began in the wide receiver rankings video, the Buffalo Bills secondary is not to be messed with. They have absolute studs in terms of cornerbacks. Now, we'll talk about the Arizona Cardinals in a moment, just in a couple teams from now, in terms of how that, the overall target distribution kind of passed itself out. But Kyler Murray rarely looked deep down the field, got the ball out of his hands really quickly early within that game. Do not worry about Marvin Harrison. Again, it is a 1-week performance. There is a marathon on hand. There's weeks 1 through 17. 1 week does not determine the potential success of a player for the remainder of the season. So do not overreact in this circumstance. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention in regards to the Atlanta Falcons Pittsburgh Steelers game, obviously, the Falcons didn't score a single point in the second half. Pittsburgh's defense was on point, which is great to see. But in terms of that second half for the Falcons, it was literally a fumble, 3 punts in a row, an interception, and then the end of the game on the final drive. In terms of overall targets, London had 4, Mooney had 3, and Pitts had 3. In terms of overall routes ran, they all ran 28. It wasn't pretty. Kirk Cousins is going to have to figure it out, and that offensive line is going to have to keep him protected. Otherwise, going forward, there's going to be trouble. But the last thing I want to mention, there was no competition in this backfield. I know that many of you were concerned about the potential of Bijan Robinson getting a couple of his touches taken. Bijan Robinson had 20 plus opportunities in this game. There is no sign of Tyler Algier dipping into his work. That is a great sign. Okay, next matchup. Let's talk about it because, again, the super chat that was just sent in is in regards to the worry of Marvin Harrison, who, again, yes, only had 1 reception in this game, but the Buffalo Bills secondary is no joke. Amongst all the wide receivers on the Arizona Cardinals today, Marvin Harrison did run the most overall routes. Despite that fact, he did not lead the team in targets. In fact, the leaders were Trey McBride with 9 targets and Greg Dortch with 8 targets. Greg Dortch was highly utilized, even though he had the third fewest. Well, yeah, he was number 3 overall in terms of wide receivers on this team in terms of routes ran. Behind, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson. But Greg Dortch, 8 targets, not a joke. He's been great over the course of the last couple seasons for fantasy when given opportunity, and it looks like he's kind of getting back on that track. Now, as for the Cardinals OC, prior to this game, he came out and said in a press conference, James Conner is our workhorse back, and that's how they utilize him. 20 total opportunities, 19 total touches, ran through this defense, scored himself a touchdown, fantastic. Kyler Murray looked fine. Again, his average depth of target was probably not a high number, mainly because he was targeting Dortch and McBride for this entire game. Really wasn't pushing the ball deep down the field, but at least was able to save his week with his rushing upside. As for the other side of this conversation, when we talk about the Buffalo Bills, I mean, geez Louise, Josh Allen, 4 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. Who would have guessed? I mean, I told you guys. He has scored a rushing touchdown in now 15 of the last 18 games that he has played. He has scored 13 rushing touchdowns in the last 9 games he has played. Again, he's Josh Allen. He's the number 1 quarterback. But what we finally got an answer regarding is, quite frankly, this is, the quote goes something of the nature of, it's like, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's really what that's the pure definition of what exactly this Buffalo Bills offense is. it's not a matter of the individual players, Kincaid, Shakir, Keon Coleman. It's literally just, as a group, they're going to be great. As individuals, they're not getting enough opportunity. Coleman with 5 targets, Shakir with 4, Curtis Samuel with 2, Kincaid with 2 targets. Obviously, Keon Coleman, amongst all the wide receivers, led this team in terms of routes ran, in terms of targets. We saw the number 2 and number 3 receiver being Mac Hollins and Shakir in terms of routes ran. But yeah, Kincaid, amongst all players on this team, had the second most snaps offensively outside of Josh Allen. So he's on the field the entire time. Sure, the matchup wasn't great for him. Sure, he didn't get enough targets this given week. It's not to say that he won't have himself opportunity going forward. Yes, he was ignored within this game. It's not to say that he's completely out of line for opportunity going forward. Don't freak out. Everybody stay calm. Let's see here. Let me travel back to the live chat. We had a couple super chats just recently sent in. Let me go ahead and address those really quickly in regards to this week. Again, for those of you who are joining us, welcome. Hope you guys are doing well. If you have not yet already, do me a favor, click the like button down below. Greatly appreciated. We're going to go through every single matchup, just give you guys my thoughts, a couple stats in regards to potential promising players and guys that maybe we shouldn't be freaking out about, going into this upcoming week. Again, Monday is typically considered to be overreaction Monday after week 1. Let's not overreact. I mentioned it at the beginning of the stream. In terms of total touchdowns scored offensively, this is the second lowest week in like the last 7 years in terms of total offensive touchdowns scored. Additionally, I did the math and I said at the beginning of the stream, when the quarterback position is averaging 191 passing yards per quarterback this week, not a great week for overall yardage. Okay, we had a super chat that was sent in from, after Serge, again, thank you, Serge, was Nick McCarty, who says, should I trade Justin Jefferson and Dobbs for Hill? Sorry, not Dobbs, Dobbins. Justin Jefferson, again, is going to be fine. A lot of that game script pretty much led to him getting less targets, and Jordan Addison injured himself again, another ankle injury. So JJ is fine. I don't think you need to swap him. Now, if you want to trade them both for Tyreek Hill, I don't have an issue with that. Obviously, Dobbins got himself just as many carries and touches overall as Gus Edwards, but was significantly more effective in terms of his burst. Yes, he was getting hawked on multiple, occasions, but it reminds me of week 1 last season. Breece Hall gets hawked on that huge play against the Buffalo Bills Monday Night Football. But later on, as the week progresses, could find himself in a bigger role. And of course, obviously as the lead back there. When Dobbins has been healthy with Gus Edwards, he has been the favorite. And he once again proved that here. Mike Alta Wheel says, I got offered St. Brown for Cup. Should I take it? Let's wait and see what exactly this Amon-Ra St. Brown injury consists of. Because if Amon-Ra St. Brown, let's figure out what this Puka Nacua injury, kind of revolves around. If the Puka Nacua injury is going to be one that is going to hold him out for the remainder of the season, God forbid, if it does, Cooper Kupp is, geez Louise, the value there. Obviously, it was presented in front of us over the course of the last couple hours. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what this injury looks like. If you're trying to just make the trade now before getting any context, you could. You certainly could. That way, regardless, you're still getting a great player and you're not having to worry. You're just pretty much cashing in. But who's to say that Kupp can't finish as the number 1 wide receiver again? He definitely looked like that tonight. Ninja Kraken says, trade or sell Drake London? Neither. Hold him. You're not going to be able to sell him for much right now. He's coming off of a week in which he had 4 targets and 2 receptions, 1 reception. You're not going to be able to trade him for much. So as of right now, you have to hold him and just see how this offense transpires as we progress throughout in the coming weeks. Because if you were to trade or sell him, quite frankly, you're just going to get pennies on the dollar. Gabriel Ortiz says, Achane and Jerome Ford for James Cook and Jamar Chase. Probably. Jamar Chase is going to get more and more utilization going on. Jamar Chase still played 75% of the offensive snaps. Don't even get it twisted. He was still heavily utilized within the offense. Ran a good volume of routes, but in terms of trading Achane Ford, Jerome Ford, again, he has value until we see a Nick Chubb return, but I don't mind that trade at all. I'd make it, Gabriel. Okay, let's see here. After Gabriel, we had Just Chrome, who says, thoughts on ETN long-term? We'll talk about it in a moment when I talk about the matchup against the Miami Dolphins. It is not promising to see that, unfortunately, there was a lot of Tank Bigsby usage in that game. Tank Bigsby had 12 rushing attempts in that game. And the overall opportunity splitting in that kind of a fashion and in that kind of a manner is very worrisome. But This is something that happened identically at the beginning of last season. If you guys remember week 1 of last year against Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Indianapolis Colts in that same game, Tank Bigsby, 7 attempts on the ground, also had a rushing touchdown. So even though this has happened in the past, I'm not thinking objectively, oh, okay, here it comes, Tank Bigsby's taking over. That's not the case. Over time, we'll see lesser of a workload from him, hopefully. Otherwise, of course, could be an option that you can pick up for your bench. Let's see here. But yeah, in terms of long-term, I know that they've said it every offseason. Oh, we want to give ETN less touches. After a while, they'll realize, hey, we have to just give him the full workload. We have to give him the 18 rushing attempts or 18 total touches per game that he needs in order to be the effective back that we know he's capable of. Jersey Sal says, in a full PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown, I need 20 from Garrett Wilson. In a full PPR, 20 from Garrett Wilson isn't out of the realm of possibility. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Especially tomorrow night. I mean, really, who else is going to catch the ball for the Jets? Myra Williams sends in a super chat, says, I'm up 102 to up 102, 105. So you're up 105, 102, you mean, right? Got Breece Hall. He has Christian McCaffrey. Outlook question too. Okay, so first and foremost, you have Breece Hall, they have Christian McCaffrey. If Christian McCaffrey is healthy, which we anticipate him to be, you probably should lose that game if you're only up 3 points. Christian McCaffrey should outscore, but time will tell, I suppose, tomorrow night. That is going to be the biggest difference maker in that regard. As for your follow-up question, I got London. Okay, very well. I got the London owner selling. He sent Ford and Terry McLaurin for London. I get London. I accepted. Did I sell? No, I don't think so. Listen, Terry McLaurin didn't see very many targets either. It looks like the favorite targets for Jaden Daniels are his running backs and his tight ends, which, again, for a rookie is very common. We had 4 receptions from Eckler, 4 receptions from Brian Robinson Jr. Zach Ertz got himself a lot of utilization. Not so much in regards to Terry McLaurin. So don't really think that's a sell. And again, like I mentioned, Jerome Ford is a guy that once, in fact, we get the return of Nick Chubb, is far less value, but that's later down the line. I think that's a solid trade. I don't have an issue with that at all. Connor sends us a question. Says, drop Deontay Johnson for Shaheed or Brandon Cooks. Okay, look, this is funny. I want to talk about the Carolina Panthers because they got dog walked today, guys. That was a good old-fashioned ass whooping. Across the board, one of the most, I mean, who would have guessed that Derek Carr would have finished this week with, top 5 points for the quarterback position. Everybody scored on that offense except for Olave and Taysom Hill. Otherwise, Foster Moreau, Jawan Johnson, Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams didn't have a touchdown all season last year till week 18. Everybody's scoring. You get a touchdown. You get a touchdown. Except for, of course, Chris Olave, and I'm crying myself to sleep tonight. And of course, Taysom Hill, who I ranked very highly, but all the other all the other tight ends decided to score in this offense. Beautiful. As for dropping Deontay Johnson for Shaheed, listen, he's a big playmaker. I'm gonna have to go watch him back. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that game by tomorrow, depending on where I have him in terms of overall waiver wire priority. That'll kind of give you an idea. I'll be back tomorrow, Connor, with a live stream tomorrow night. So I'll remember this question and we'll talk about it again tomorrow. But as it currently stands, I got to go watch that game back, see what kind of utilization Shaheed had and what kind of opportunities we're looking at besides deep ball potential upside. Thank you, Connor. Phil sends in a question, says, Dak Prescott, 11 points. ETN, 11 points. Drake London, 3.5. Mark Andrews, 3.5. Bright spots, we have Devontae Smith, Chris Godwin, Vikings defense. Any thoughts on the 4 players that didn't play well? Didn't expect, Dak Prescott to play well. That defense is solid. And obviously, as time progresses, we'll go ahead and see him play far better in better matchups. But I thought he played okay for the overall circumstance. An away game on the road, first game of the season. Again, the week 1 is the 4th preseason game. Players are not going to have themselves super upside performances right off the rip. It's going to take a couple weeks. That's why we say not to overreact. But in the case of ETN, not really too worried. London, same. Mark Andrews, that's my biggest concern of the bunch. But we'll talk about that tomorrow when we talk about Isaiah Likely. MIGZ, nice to see you. Long time no see. Who says, trade Brian Robinson and Ridley for Adams. Devontae Adams had 6 targets today in an offense that, quite frankly, should have been throwing the ball the entire time. Are we immediately trading Brian Robinson? It depends on what the rest of your team's depth looks like. If you're trading away Ridley, I'm okay with it. DeAndre Hopkins didn't even play today, and Ridley had no utilization, mainly because of the difficult matchup on hand against Chicago's secondary. But in this circumstance, when I'm thinking about the upside of getting Adams, I don't have an issue with it as long as you have running back depth on roster that you could at least not have to worry about. My other running backs are JT and Cook. Yeah, so in that case, if you're going to trade B-Rob and Ridley, let's get rid of them immediately. Give me Devontae Adams the rest of the season. I don't have an issue with that at all. Let's see here. Abide Los Angeles says, drop Terry McLaurin on the waivers. Who are you thinking? No. We're not dropping Terry. Do not drop Terry. It's 1 week. Everybody stay calm. Everybody stay effing calm. It's a bad week. I get it. It's a bad look. I get it. Give it time. Okay? It's a rookie quarterback. Give it time. Myra Williams follows up, says, week 2, start and sit. Okay. It's so early. We're not even done with week 1, Myra. We're not even done with week 1. London, Jacobs, Devontae Smith. Okay, look, again, Jacobs is going to be dependent on the quarterback who's playing. London is, again, if I'm not mistaken, London plays against, let's see here, NFL week 2. I haven't even gotten past each of my team reviews for this week. Let's see here. The Atlanta Falcons next week, I believe they play against the Eagles. They do. That's a good matchup. I don't have an issue with that at all. The issue is the defensive line getting after Kirk Cousins. If they're not able to protect him, we're going to have troubles. But if, as of right now, let's just stick with the idea of probably Smith for sure, and then probably London. So we'll just, baby steps. We'll get there. JK says, I have Muth. Should I be using my waiver on Likely? Probably. Yeah, probably. Muth didn't do anything today, and he still played a lot. Okay, where is this other question? Okay, so I saw that Farouk sent in a super chat. There wasn't anything attached. Farouk, I'm going to get to your question in a moment as soon as I can find it in the live chat. So let's find Farouk real quick, and then I'm getting back. Thoughts on CeeDee Lamb? Is Corum droppable? No, that's not drop him yet. Not yet. He obviously didn't do anything, but give me 1 more week to give me the confirmation that he's quite literally just a handcuff, and then we're good. Again, I've said it in the past. Rookie running backs don't have a great track record with Sean McVay. He doesn't really like to use them in their first year. He typically uses them in year 2 and beyond. But yeah, as for CeeDee Lamb, again, the guy didn't have a training camp. He wasn't going to have 130 yards and a touchdown like Tyreek Hill did, right? So give him some time. Okay, so continuing on. I think I pretty much covered everything I wanted to say in regards to the Bills and Cardinals game. Let's talk about the Tennessee Titans taking on the Chicago Bears really quickly. In regards to the Tennessee Titans, I mentioned this offseason, and I'll continue to mention it because it has come to fruition, fortunately. The coaching staff of the Tennessee Titans has said there's going to be a 1A, 1B conversation with Pollard and Spears. That does not exist. We saw it in the preseason. It did not exist then. It does not exist now. Pollard had 20 opportunities in this game in comparison to Spears, who had 8. Opportunities being the combination of total rushing attempts and targets within the game. Pollard is clearing away the number 1 running back of this offense and obviously played extremely well in the overall matchup against Chicago, which again is a top 5 run-stopping defense in regards to running back rushing statistics. Outside of that, with D-Hop playing less than Jamar Chase, that was a surprise, but D-Hop barely played, ran 9 routes, and Calvin Ridley still only getting 7 targets. That concerns me. Again, when you have a tough matchup, it definitely is going to make it difficult for Will Levis. But if Will Levis is still not able to get his number 1 targets enough opportunity, it is worrisome to an extent. Now, for the other side of the ball, in regards to Chicago, DeAndre Swift played 39 offensive snaps in comparison to Travis Homer and Khalil Herbert, who combined for 17. So Swift is clearing away the number 1 back. That is given. Obviously, still didn't play well. 10 carries for 30 yards, not going to get the job done. Not enough receiving utilization. And going forward, again, They didn't have any opportunities to score touchdowns. They didn't score an offensive touchdown as a team. They got bailed out by their defense today. And, of course, their kicking game with Cairo Santos playing well. But the big 3 receivers for this team, when you have a quarterback throwing for 93 yards and have a 43% passing completion percentage, we're not going to find much production regardless of whether or not Keenan Allen has 11 targets. If you're only catching 4 receptions, we're in trouble. Hopefully, Caleb Williams will get out the early jitters and they can get him back on some sort of track. But that is, something that with a rookie quarterback, we're going to have to wait and see. Obviously, it'll be less of a priority for us to play him in fantasy. But as for his weapons, we're going to have to see how that transpires. And then we did get a confirmation based on this game that Gerald Everett is the number 1 tight end. Not only did he play more, he ran more routes than Cole Kmet and saw more overall workload. So Cole Kmet is kind of playing the second fiddle to Gerald Everett within this overall offense. All right, let me travel back to the live chat. Again, for those of you who are joining us on this Sunday night, hope you guys are doing well. Again, tomorrow we will have a Monday waiver wire episode available. I'll also be streaming tomorrow night. I'm going to try to stream every night for the remainder of the season. So tomorrow night, if you have any waiver wire questions, we'll have more information regarding all the injuries. I know that Jake Ferguson, David Njoku went down with an injury, Puka Nacua, Kenneth Walker, of course, with that, I think it was an oblique or a stomach injury, something of that, like an ab injury. We're going to have to wait and see what kind of information is released to the public in regards to those injuries. Obviously, it may take a couple days to get a clear understanding as to what exactly we are looking at. But as we progress, we'll get more and more information regarding these players. So we had a couple of super chats sent in. We had JK who says, I have Muth. We took care of that one. Carl sends in a super chat. Carl says, I have Olave and Pittman and Pollard, Jaden Reed and Worthy. What should I do for week 2? Week 2, we'll get there when we get to Tuesday in terms of starts or sits for running backs, Wednesday wide receivers. Again, Reed is very much so dependent on who plays quarterback. I know that the Packers earlier this morning, they did reach out to Ryan Tannehill. That makes it far more compelling for me to start a potential Green Bay Packer wide receiver in the coming weeks in the absence of Jordan Love in comparison to having Malik Willis at quarterback. So for Reed, time will tell. Probably not going to be a start this week if Malik Willis is the starting quarterback. Don't really trust it too much. But Pittman, Pollard, Worthy, Olave has to start. Those are guys that, I mean, they've played well in the past. I'm not going to give up on them just because they had one bad week, especially Olave and Pittman, especially those two, because obviously Pollard and Worthy both played extremely well. Thank you for your question, Carl. I appreciate it. Jersey Style says, I lost Love in a Superflex format, 6 point per passing touchdown. Play Brian Thomas Jr. or JMO in my Superflex besides Daniel Jones? Probably. I don't know if what is week 2 schedule for the New York Giants? The New York Giants take on the Washington Commanders. Listen, the Washington Commanders defense is, I don't want to say they're one of the worst. No, I will say it. They're one of the worst defenses in the league. Clear and away. It has not changed. I know that they brought in a defensive-minded head coach. I know they've brought in different personnel. It was apparent that Baker Mayfield lighting them up for that much, 4 passing touchdowns, it was going to happen. That secondary is still in shambles. So maybe Daniel Jones can take advantage of it. We'll have to wait and see. So in your circumstance, 6 point per passing touchdown, Daniel Jones probably not the best option. I try to maybe look to see if you can get someone else. But until then, it might have to be a receiver in a full PPR scoring format. Also, you had a question saying, should I trade one of these wide receivers plus Harris for James Cook? I don't mind that. Look, again, here's the thing about James Cook, guys. James Cook is purely going to be handcuffed by Josh Allen on the goal line for the rest of the season. It is just how it works. So if, in fact, you are thinking that there is a potential in which somehow, some way, he's going to get himself an abundance of rushing touchdowns, you're kidding yourself. You really are. Okay, Farouk, did we take care of your question? I can't remember. Farouk, if I didn't, do me a favor and just type in the chat. Thank you. Appreciate it. You know what I need to do? My YouTube's kind of acting a little bit weird. I want to open this up just so I can go ahead and set it up properly. Okay. So we had a couple questions that came in. Jay Money, who says, thoughts on Zamir White and Rico Dowdle? It's okay. I want to go ahead and I want to take this off the screen just so that we're not, okay. So we're talking about everything at this point. Everything's on the table, just basically on the questions that are sent in. Jay Money's Zamir White, first and foremost. Alexander Madison dominates the receiving game, has a receiving touchdown. Zamir White not able to run the ball as much, fumbles the ball mid-game after a big run. He looks like a great running back. It's just how often are they going to be in game scripts in which they're either close or even remotely in a positive game script to where they can run the ball on a consistent basis without having to worry. That is the concern. Otherwise, he's got great talent and he will be given opportunity, but he won't get any receiving upside. So he's really just like a half PPR, low-end RB2, high-end RB3. Rico Dowdle, again, if you're going to split touches with Zeke, that's fine. But if Zeke's going to be the goal line back, unfortunately, that's the end of the road. But time will tell as we progress here if Rico will get more of a role within those opportunities down in the red zone. I mean, Rico did steal touchdowns from Tony Pollard last year, but again, it was few and far between. As for your follow-up question there, Jay Money, drop cuff in Braylon Allen for Justice Hill, Shaheed, AD Mitchell, Irving, McLaughlin. I think I'd rather go after McLaughlin or Shaheed in that circumstance. Irving played in the blowout. McLaughlin was splitting a lot of touches there with Javonte, and Shaheed would probably be the most valuable of the bunch in that circumstance. Connor sends in a super chat, says Shakir, Brandon Cooks, or Shaheed in a full PPR. Again, tomorrow's waiver wire video will specifically tell you from me which wide receiver I rank in terms of the most valuable, and then I'll also give you guys suggestions in terms of percentage of fab that I would like you to use if you plan on going after that player, assuming of course you're going after a player of that capacity. MIGC says, sorry, I did ask another question you missed. Okay, let me see what your other question was. So so first and foremost, MIGZ, we'll take the Adams trade. As for your follow-up question, trade ETN and Ridley for St. Brown. If you have James, yeah, let's do that too. I don't have an issue with that. I'll take St. Brown there. Yeah, honestly, between the two trades, I'd rather just get the St. Brown half of that deal. MIGZ. Yeah, that works. Thank you. Apologies for missing that second half. I'm Gucci, your Polo says, thoughts on Brian Robinson Jr. versus Pollard rest of the season, full PPR? In a full PPR, Pollard will... Look, you know what's surprising? I didn't expect Brian Robinson Jr. to get that much workload within the receiving game. Brian Robinson Jr. was a guy that I mentioned this offseason. Again, Cliff Kingsbury, his running backs, James Conner, Kenyon Drake, when he was a head coach for the Cardinals, were both top 15 backs in their given years. So if Brian Robinson Jr. is going to be given a lot of opportunity within the receiving game, also the clear workload within the red zone, obviously Jaden Daniels stole potentially 2 rushing touchdowns today. That is always going to be a threat, just like it is for, Jalen Hurts threatening Saquon Barkley, Anthony Richardson threatening Jonathan Taylor. But in this circumstance, between the two of them, I prefer Pollard. That's where I had it preseason, and I don't think I'm changing it as it currently stands. Apes Against the Machine says, hot take, Brian Thomas Jr. will finish ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. That is a very hot take. Did he play well? Yes. Did he score a touchdown? Yes. But did he get enough opportunity? I would say relatively no. They ran the ball too much today in Jacksonville, and they were not able to maintain the lead. That's the difficult part. If they were able to maintain that lead and pull out that game, oh man, it would be really... It would have been a great Sunday for Jacksonville Jaguars fans. Phil sends in a follow-up question, says, McBride and JSN messed me up. I had Eckler instead of JK, excuse me. Didn't know how he would go off again, coming off of an Achilles injury, J.K. Dobbins, not even just an Achilles injury. So he tore his ACL in 2022, right? Was it 20? No. He tore his ACL in 2021. Didn't return until late 2022. Then started in 2023 and tore his Achilles. Dude has had every terrible injury you could possibly imagine for running backs and is still playing well. So for those of you who have him, congratulations. That is great. And going forward, hopefully he'll just continue to build more workload within that offense, obviously, which is run first. DTN Rome 88 says, what's your outlook on Jacobs, Jones, and Pollard? Jacobs is very much so going to be dependent on how long we are going to be without Jordan Love. That being said, I mean, again, the thing is, the offense for the Green Bay Packers functions off of their quarterback. If you don't have a great quarterback there, the running game is not going to be as viable of a threat. When you're playing up against Malik Willis, you're going to stack the box with 8 or 9 defenders. That's what you're going to do. So Jacobs would hurt until the return of Love. So hopefully sooner rather than later. Aaron Jones looked great. There was a drive in the second quarter where Ty Chandler just got every touch. So they're trying to keep Aaron Jones fresh to an extent, but he still played well, was efficient, got the goal line work. Love to see it. Receiving utilization. And of course, Sam Darnold played better than people were giving him credit to, which we'll talk about in a moment. As for Pollard, again, like I mentioned earlier, 20 total opportunities in comparison to Spears' 8. He is clearing away that back for this team that is going to continue to carry the vast majority of the overall workload. Bros Pros says, Goff nearly cost the Lions the game. However, Bates, Gibbs, Monty are the heroes and deserve... Listen, that offensive line at the end of that game, they don't get the credit, and you're not crediting them there. That offensive line was brutalizing the LA Rams front seven. Those linebackers could not fill those holes. They were getting attacked on the second level immediately and could not shed blocks. They couldn't. Kyron Williams, ACL, says, thoughts on Evan Ingram? He's my tight end one. Yeah, that was a little bit concerning to see. I would have thought we would have seen a lot more 12 personnel sets. We saw a lot of 11 personnel, a lot of 3 wide receiver sets against the Miami Dolphins secondary. We saw a lot of Christian Kirk within the slot position, and that was really the primary reason why we saw a lot of lesser Evan Ingram utilization in routes ran. Also, Strange, their second string tight end, was starting to dig into his work. But again, Evan Ingram's going to have these down games. It's week 1. It's still early. I'm not freaking out too much about it. Obviously, there are potential options on the waiver that we can address. But for right now, I'm still confident that Evan Ingram will still be a top 12 option going forward. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Okay. Now that we've answered all those questions, I want to get back to continuing on a couple of my reviews in regards to some of these teams. Let's talk about this game. The game in which I thought, clear and away, the Cincinnati Bengals should win this game, right? Because it's the Cincinnati Bengals. They're playing against the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots should lose, just as many games as potentially the Carolina Panthers this year. Well, with just Jacoby Brissett and the boys, they handed an ass whooping out to the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati, which is incredible. Well done to them. Well done to the coaching staff. Obviously, the Patriots won off of, they had more rushing yards than they had passing yards in this game. Just putting that into perspective. Ramondre Stevenson and the offensive line carried this team. Clear and away, they did it. And of course, the defense really did help them a lot. But Ramondre Stevenson, somebody was saying earlier, the Ramondre is going to be an RB1 rest of the season. Like, write it down. He's capable if the offense can stay in close games like this. If they're going to be down 20 points, Ramondre is going to have to get a lot of receiving utilization because he's not going to have games in which he's carrying the ball 20 times every week. And that's really what's going to potentially hold him out. But in terms of bursts, in terms of playmaking ability, there were 5 runs in this game where he looked great. He had a 16, 17, 12, a 9-yard run. Pretty much half of his yardage came from 5 attempts out of his 15. And obviously some of his offensive linemen missed a couple yikes moments there, but ultimately, with the volume of opportunity, delivered. Now, as for the other side of the ball, which is really the conversation, because when we talk about the Patriots, nobody within the receiving game wasn't doing anything. Doesn't matter. Hunter Henry, Jalen Polk had 1 reception, Demario Douglas, KJ Osborne. It doesn't matter who. The receiving game does not exist because the quarterback really isn't up to par to support a fantasy option in this circumstance. But as for the Cincinnati Bengals, a defense that I had as my number 1 ranked defense. Yikes, huh? What a week. I guess we're just going to be starting every defense that plays against the Giants and the Carolina Panthers for the remainder of the season. So this upcoming week, I don't want to play the Washington Commanders against the Giants. We could, but I don't like it. The Chargers defense against Carolina, probably the play this upcoming week in terms of defenses because the Carolina Panthers, hot garbage recently. But in regards to the rest of this offense in terms of Cincinnati, Jamar Chase played far more than we thought. 43 of the 51 overall snaps. Got himself 6 targets. Again, as the weeks progress, he'll get himself more work. Do not worry about it. Again, this was kind of a warm-up game for Jamar Chase anyway. But when we talk about Chase Brown versus Zach Moss, because that really is the only other conversation we need to have until we get the return of T. Higgins, Zach Moss played 33 of the snaps in comparison to Chase Brown's 17. He got 13 opportunities in comparison to Chase Brown's 6. It is clear in a way that Zach Moss is currently the lead back of this offense, had himself a rushing touchdown. Surely wasn't incredibly efficient. The offensive line wasn't playing well, typically doesn't. But going forward, Zach Moss is the number 1, and it has pretty much been established as of right now, and it is going to require Chase Brown to supplant him with an incredible effort of plays in the coming weeks. Otherwise, Zach Moss, again, high-end RB3, low-end RB2 going forward, especially in good matchups. Okay, let's hop back into the chat before I continue on with the next couple potential matchups in which we're reviewing. Let's see here. We had a couple questions sent in via Super Chat. Just want to go ahead and address those really quickly before I get into the live chat. It's Kafka says, Olave only had 2 targets, SMH. Yeah, imagine a game in which they put up 47 points as the New Orleans Saints put up 47 and Olave does nothing. To put it in perspective, though, they didn't need him to do anything, right? So when you're up so many points and you're running the ball for majority of that second half, I just love the idea that they're getting confidence and they're building confidence down in the red zone because that's where this team struggled the most. But yeah, the lack of opportunity for Olave was definitely painful for many of us, perhaps lost you a week, but it won't be a consistent option. He is clearing away the number 1. We know this. Jay sends in a super chat, says, thoughts on Mostert? Yeah, I mean, it's clear. Achan's the guy, right? And we'll talk about it in just a moment. But if I scroll down and I look at this, like, it's 17 opportunities compared to 9. Additionally, Mostert played more snaps. Sorry, Achan played more snaps than Mostert and really was a huge threat on third down on receiving plays. 7 receptions for Achan and got himself the rushing touchdown. And on top of that, Jeff Wilson Jr. started digging into Mostert's work. That in itself speaks volumes. So for Achan, these are all pluses. As for Daniel, what does this say? Daniel Jones or Kirk in the Superflex, says Jay. Daniel J or Kirk in the Superflex. Is it Kirk Cousins or Christian Kirk? Because this upcoming week, I could justify playing Daniel Jones against Washington's defense. Jason Rodriguez sends in a super chat. Thank you very much, Jason. Says, I have Bijan Robinson, Mostert, JK, Gus Edwards, Jalen Wright. Okay, Jalen Wright didn't play today. As for Gus Edwards, did play, but didn't play very well. J.K. Dobbins is kind of leading himself into a pole position there. Mostert, again, didn't really do much, and you have Bijan. So pretty much your 1 and 2 is Bijan and J.K. Dobbins as it currently stands. Should I drop Gus Edwards for Vidal? Probably not. You're going to have to wait on that. Again, J.K. Dobbins, again, very much so injury prone throughout his career. Maybe you want to just continue to hold on to Gus Edwards as of right now, unless something happened to Gus that I'm not aware of in terms of an injury. Also, Kupp, Waddle, Kirk, Tank, JMO. Is JMO my flex now? Tank Dell's overall workload utilization wasn't terrible, but in great matchups, when we go forward here for the Detroit Lions, especially going up against Tampa Bay next week, it's not out of the realm of possibility that JMO can be implemented as your flex. I think as we continue to build confidence regarding his workload, it'll get there for sure. But again, understand he's a big playmaking ability guy. And once, in fact, we get 10 targets back in the direction of Amon-Ra and 9 targets back in the direction of Laporta, it is going to diminish the overall workload advantage that JMO had in this game in comparison to future weeks. Okay, let's see here. I want to continue on with the next matchup. Let's talk about Tank Dell, who we were talking about just a moment ago. His overall utilization wasn't terrible. In terms of overall snaps played in comparison to the rest, I mean, they played nearly identical snaps. In terms of overall targets, Nico had 8, Tank Dell had 7, Diggs had 6. And sure, Diggs scored 2 of the receiving touchdowns, and Nico Collins had majority of the receiving work in terms of yardage. They played well. That is all that matters. They played well. There are going to be weeks in which Tank Dell plays well, and the others don't. And that is just going to be the rotation that is going to build over time. But Diggs, down in the red zone within that slot position for the first touchdown, and even in the second touchdown, his route running ability in short yardage situations just makes him such a threat that, of course, it's no surprise that Stroud is looking in his direction in these circumstances. But as an offense, Joe Mixon getting 30 rushing attempts is pretty much the biggest highlight from this game. Joe Mixon has only twice ever in his career ever had 30 rushing attempts, and that was back in 2021 and 2019. So the fact that Joe Mixon's coming out and putting up 30 rushing attempts in week 1 makes me feel like I want to pick up Joe Mixon's backup, because 30 carries is so many that must hurt your body and must put you at a disadvantage for the remainder of the season. But again, great numbers, an incredible week. Was top 2, I think. I think he was the number 2 back in the given week. Incredible game across the board. But yeah, I'm not too worried about Tank Dell. Again, he's going to have those up and down weeks. We knew that before the season started. As for the other side of the ball, Anthony Richardson had 9 completions and still had 212 passing yards. Can you imagine that? 9 completions on, I think it was like 19 passing attempts. Outside of Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, nobody else ran the ball. And obviously, Jonathan Taylor, because of the fact that they were down, really wasn't able to be given a high workload share of overall rushing attempts. The receiving game really was non-existent outside of Alec Pierce's huge touchdown. Michael Pittman Jr., 8 targets, sure, but he struggled mightily against Houston. Last season in both games didn't have great performances. So hopefully it's just a matter of Houston rather than the overall offense itself not giving him enough opportunities. Again, 8 is fine. He's not going to get those 11 targets per game like he was able to average last season with Minshew, but we were hoping that more touchdown upside would be implemented within this overall offense because of the presence of Anthony Richardson and, of course, Jonathan Taylor being healthy. So going forward, that could be the case, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm not giving up on Pittman. He's far too talented and has proven over the course of the last 3 years that regardless of what quarterback he plays with, whether it is Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, Gardner Minshew, he's a top 24 wide receiver. That's for sure. All right, let's see here. Scrolling down, we had YG, who says, drafted London, Olave, and Kincaid. All three are busts. For week 1, they're busts, but hey, going forward, trust me, they're going to be fine. Do not overreact, please. They're far better. Is Kincaid still going for his 90 receptions, 10 touchdowns? We're going to hope so. We're definitely going to hope so. Again, listen, last season, when he was the pole position player in terms of like the number 1 tight end, I mean, again, he played 51 snaps today. He played more snaps than anybody but Josh Allen. When he was the pole position player, he was on a pace of where he could have gotten himself in a full 17-game season, 80, 90 target or 80, 90 receptions. I mean, last season, Kincaid had how many receptions? Let me see this. Dalton Kincaid. Last season, as a total, had 73 receptions. So the idea of him going for 90 is still not out of the realm of possibility just because of 1 week of a performance. Okay, let's go ahead. Let me refresh this. Get back on track there. We had a question that came in from the real, what is that? Geese squared? G squared? G squared, not geese. I'm an idiot. The real G squared, thank you very much for the super chat. Says, thoughts on Deontay Johnson with 6 targets? Brutal. Disgusting. The Carolina Panthers are way worse than I thought. Could be the matchup. Maybe the Saints defense is incredible. I mean, they looked incredible. But the fact that the first passing attempt of Bryce Young was an immediate interception scares the crap out of me. That being said, as for your other question, versus Amari Cooper, who had 9 targets on 2 receptions, Amari Cooper is just a better player in comparison to Deontay Johnson. He has the better quarterback as well. But unfortunately, the offensive line for the Cleveland Browns just is not equipped enough to stop a pass rush of Dallas's capabilities. So, of course, Amari Cooper suffered in that circumstance. If David Njoku is going to miss a significant amount of time with a high ankle sprain, it just leads to more opportunity for Amari Cooper going forward here. As for the follow-up, do you think JSN, Dowdle, Josh Palmer are capable of 15 points? Going forward, I mean, the fact that Tyler Lockett led the Seattle Seahawks in receptions and yards today scares the crap out of me. It is funny. He's the guy coming off of injury, and he's leading the team in receiving utilization and all those stats. Dowdle, again, like I mentioned earlier, unless he's going to supplant Zeke and be far more efficient, it looks like Zeke's going to be the goal line back, which really does siphon a lot of value away from Dowdle. Palmer was okay. I mean, again, if he doesn't drop that touchdown, he has himself an okay 10-point week. But he drops a touchdown. It's going to happen. And then he gets himself ejected not even 10 minutes later, interestingly enough. Just Chrome says, thoughts on DK Metcalf long-term? Again, Patrick Surtain was the risk. We thought that DK Metcalf, regardless of that risk, would be decent enough. But in this circumstance, don't worry about it. We're fine. Patrick Surtain is a hell of a player and, of course, demands respect in regards to starting these players. Okay, moving on. Again, for those of you who are joining us, welcome. Hope you guys are doing well. Just reviewing week 1 and the chaos that has ensued over the course of the last couple weeks. If you guys haven't yet already, do me a favor. Click the like button down below. Greatly appreciate the support. As we progress, again, I want to talk about the next matchup within week 1 in regards to the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Miami Dolphins. I just mentioned it just moments ago, but just again, a couple of my brief thoughts on the matter. Achane is clearing away the RB1. No question there. In terms of snaps, in terms of usage, he's the RB1. Settled, done. Waddle played well. Tyreek Hill played well. That's pretty much all that matters. Those are the 3 most valuable pieces of that offense. As for the other side, Brian Thomas Jr., an incredibly promising week 1. We'd love to see more opportunity going forward, and it'll probably take place considering how well he played, especially matching up against guys like Jalen Ramsey. As for Etienne and Tank Bigsby, Etienne played 37 snaps in comparison to Tank Bigsby's 17. But yet, despite that, the opportunity share was 15 versus 12. Tank Bigsby touched the ball far too much for my comfort. But again, like I mentioned earlier, we had the same deal last season, week 1. 7 rushing attempts went to Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby. That is a tongue twister of sorts for me. I don't know why. 7 attempts went to him last year, week 1, led to a touchdown. Then after that, slowly but surely, his overall workload utilization disappeared. Maybe because he's a second-year back, they have more confidence in him. But ultimately, this is the Travis Etienne show. I'm not too worried about it going forward. Now, as for Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, just not enough overall targets of opportunity. We've seen far more go in their direction. They were up early. They ran the ball in the second half, probably too much. And that's really what did them in at the end. If they continued to throw the ball, they probably would have won that game against the Miami Dolphins. All right, let's talk about the dog walk of the century. One of the biggest beatdowns. Again, there's nothing promising that I saw out of that Carolina Panthers offense. Quite frankly, nothing at all. Xavier Legette got himself decent opportunity, which is great. First round rookie wide receiver. Outside of that, I'm scared. Chuba Hubbard didn't look great because, again, you can't run the ball when you're down 40. And Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen. Again, nothings. So there I will raise my alarm and start to go into panic mode. Because, again, it's already a bad offense. Now, as for the other side of the ball, in regards to the Saints, that defense played well. They play against Dallas this upcoming week, so I'm probably not starting the Saints defense. But as for everybody scoring a touchdown and more, fantastic. We'll take it. Obviously, Chris Olave didn't do anything, but we'll be fine. The one player that I did think did play really well was their kicker, Blake Grupe. 4 field goals, 57, 44, 52, and 39-yard field goals. Again, one of those guys that if, in fact, you didn't have a productive kicker this week, could be one that if, in fact, I mean, they're playing indoors next week, whether it is in New Orleans or Dallas, I'm not sure. Indoor stadium could have himself another solid performance. As for the Minnesota Vikings taking on the New York Giants, pretty straightforward. Sam Darnold played better than people thought. I think he was like 19 for 24 passing. I mentioned it, prior to the season beginning. The last 16 starts of Sam Darnold's career has led to him scoring 25 total touchdowns in those 16 games. In this game, 2 passing touchdowns. Yes, he did turn over the ball, but hey, they dominated because they're playing against the Giants. That Giants secondary did not play well. Now, Jordan Addison getting injured again, not a great sign. Justin Jefferson will probably get more targets as we progress, and there will be more opportunities for him, especially in negative game scripts in which they are not leading and running the ball for majority of that second half. But as it currently stands in regards to the running game, it is the Aaron Jones show. Sure, Ty Chandler did have spurts of time in which he was utilized, but ultimately, it's going to be Aaron Jones all the way, as long as he stays healthy, of course, getting up there in age. As for the Giants, I mean, look, they had their chances. They were 0 for 3 in the red zone. On multiple occasions, they could have played well. Really, the biggest playmaker on this offense that really came out of nowhere, per se, was Wan'Dale Robinson. He will be mentioned on tomorrow's waiver wire video. 12 total targets. That is not a joke. If as long as Daniel Jones continues to look in his direction as a get the ball out of my hands quickly receiver, 12 targets is something that we cannot pass over in terms of the potential of that for Wan'Dale Robinson going forward. Devin Singletary, 15 total opportunities, 14 touches. Okay game. Theo Johnson is their starting tight end. Daniel Bellinger, barely played, but Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end, could be of value going forward if Daniel Jones wants to wake up. Malik Neighbors was fine. Again, we knew that against the Minnesota Vikings, against Stephon Gilmore, wasn't going to be easy for the rookie. But going into this upcoming weekend's game against the Washington Commanders, I wouldn't be surprised if I have Malik Neighbors as a top 15 ranked wide receiver this week. In regards to the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Vegas Raiders, quick thoughts, and I'll get back into the live chat. Dobbins played well. He also outsnapped and outplayed Gus Edwards, which is obviously huge. As for the trio of wide receivers, Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer, Ladd McConkey. McConkey scoring a touchdown. Fantastic. We love to see that. Quentin Johnston didn't look terrible. He didn't drop too many passes. Joshua Palmer could have played significantly better, assuming he caught that touchdown and didn't drop it in the back of the end zone. On the other side of the ball, the fact that Devontae Adams comes away from a game in which they're in a negative game script with 6 targets is worrisome, but the biggest surprise is Brock Bowers, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 58 receiving yards. So if that continues, quite a promising potential output there for the rookie tight end. All right, let's go ahead, hop back into this chat. We had a question that was sent in from Christopher K, who says, I was worried about Keenan Allen, but he got 11 targets. Yeah, look, here's the thing. Caleb Williams is going to have to improve significantly more, and those targets are going to have to be far more accurate. Otherwise, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble there. But yeah, Keenan Allen at the end of that game was limping. So we're going to have to see whether he's healthy or not, even going into this week. We'll keep that monitored. But yes, good opportunity share. Michael Barton says, would you play Scary Terry going forward, And how do we feel about Coleman? I mean, look, Coleman getting 5 targets is great in terms of the overall workload for that Buffalo Bills offense. But like I mentioned before, what's the quote that I mentioned before? I read it earlier because I wrote it down because it literally represents the Buffalo Bills offense. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's literally what the Buffalo Bills offense is. So there are going to be weeks in which Shakir scores. There are going to be weeks in which Kincaid scores. But really, it doesn't seem like there's a clear number one as it currently stands based on what we've witnessed from this offense in week 1. So You know how we talked about the speculation of who's going to be the number one? That is still yet to be answered. But Coleman did play the most overall snaps and did run the most routes. So he's clearly not coming off of the field. So if you're going forward and trusting one of the wide receivers to play in a flex potential position or wide receiver 3 would be Coleman, based on the fact that he's on the field more often than anybody else and potentially available to get more opportunities in terms of targets, receptions, etc. But as for Scary Terry, I mean, again, he plays against the Giants this week. I'm playing Scary Terry, yes. Chase McGraw says, should I be worried about Mark Andrews? Mark Andrews did have a pretty tough matchup against Kansas City, on top of the fact that he was getting bracketed for a lot of that game. So as we progress, when they have easier matchups going forward, we may see a more even split between his utilization and, of course, the utilization we get from Isaiah Likely. This week's matchup will be a huge telltale in terms of, is Mark Andrews going to be utilized at a higher capacity in comparison to how he was utilized last week, which I believe the answer to be yes. So am I still going to rank him in my top 12 this week? Yes. Can I also put Isaiah Likely in that top 12? Probably. And probably I'd feel comfortable even starting them both going into the given week, assuming the targets for that position are going to continue to be a mainstay within this offense. But do you remember they threw the ball, 44 times in that game against Kansas City? Let me see here. 41 times. Lamar often doesn't throw the ball 40 plus times per game. So when we get back to Lamar throwing the ball 30 times in a game, 32 times, if we don't score touchdowns from Likely and or Mark Andrews, there's going to be trouble. So both of them are going to be very much so touchdown dependent going forward if we're not throwing the ball for majority of this game. What's up, Franklin? How's it going? Kings of Kings says, hey, Andrew, do I trade Waddle and David Montgomery for Amon-Ra St. Brown? I don't have any other running back on my bench. Just have Achane and Mixon. My wide receivers are Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, and Waddle. As it currently stands, I'd say no. Listen, if you don't have any other running backs on your roster, King of Kings, you pretty much want to have David Montgomery there for the abundance of depth, to be totally honest. So if anybody gets injured or if you have a bye week, you have somebody that can help you win those given weeks. So in this circumstance, I'm probably keeping it because your team is just strong with the depth that you have available. Let's see here. Fernando Perez sends in a super chat. Thank you, Fernando. Says, I got offered Rashee Rice for Brian Robinson. Should I? Yes, take it. Give me Rashee Rice there. Absolutely. I have Breece Hall, Etienne, Kamara, Rashad White. Yeah, absolutely. Give me Rashee Rice there. Abso-freaking-lutely, Fernando. That is beautiful. Take advantage of that. People do not understand the value of Rashee Rice is extremely high. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. Okay, let's see here. How many more games do I have to cover before we're finished here in regards to potential? There's like 4 more, because we already talked about the Rams, so 3 more technically. Just want to see what you guys have to say in the live chat before I continue on. Real Franklin says, tough weekend for all the tight ends, man. Yeah, only 3 tight ends have surpassed 10 fantasy points. And by the way that this is kind of tracking, it'll probably be whoever has Kittle playing tomorrow night, don't expect much. Just put it out there. Maybe a tough week here on hand. Let's hear. Stephen Hawkins says, why the faith in Olave? He has issues getting on the same page as Carr. Going back to last year, Saints scored 47, and he should have been a bigger part. Okay. The faith in Olave exists based on talent and past success. The biggest indicator for future achievement is past success. And what has Olave done within this offense? He has found success. That's a given. You can't, there's no refusing that fact. It is an objective truth that within this offense last year, he found success. Now, obviously, that was the first year with Derek Carr. Now, this is a first year in a new offense in comparison to last year. So, again, this is a wide receiver that is young, that is still learning a new offense. And sure, it may still be getting on the same page as his quarterback, but clear in a way, he's still the number 1 wide receiver. And unless you think that the Saints are going to be blowing out teams every game for the remainder of the season, you should anticipate that Derek Carr is most likely going to be in scenarios going forward where he's not going to just be able to tear apart, any defense like he did today. Like, sure, Derek Carr showed up, and let me see his stats. Where was his overall numbers here? Because his numbers must have been absolutely wild in terms of completion percentage. Let's go find this. Let's scroll up. That's preseason. This is week 1. Beautiful. Let's go to the Saints game. Derek Carr was 19 of 23 passing, okay? We're not going to get that every week. 23 passing attempts. I mean, shoot, even going back to last year. That's a rare occurrence. It legitimately is, especially like last season, 33, 36, 37, 50, 55. 27, 34, 38, 40. Like, there's a lot of passing attempts in this offense, especially when they're losing. They're going to be in a lot of competitive matchups going forward. Olave will get a lot of workload. Don't give up on it. I don't like the negativity I'm hearing, guys. It's way too much negativity for just 1 week, please. It's like, imagine, look, last season, it's not like Olave didn't have dud performances. Of course he did. Everybody has dud performances. But the negativity I'm hearing it's too powerful. It shouldn't be so dense so early. Nathan sends in a super chat, says, what are we doing with Amon-Ra? Keeping him. If you don't have him, trade for him. Legitimately. Don't be scared. That's the last thing you should be, is scared. Honestly. Let's see here. Bang says, scared of Drake London? No, I'm scared of Kirk Cousins' offensive line. The Atlanta Falcons' offensive line is the issue. Patriots 535 says, what past success? So do we not consider anything that Olave has done in his career as success? We don't consider that? Look, you guys hold players to such a standard that it's just unreasonable. That's the fact of the matter. If you hold players to an unbelievable standard, like Olave is not Amon-Ra St. Brown. Olave is Olave. He was averaging 10 fantasy points per game last year. That's pretty good. He was a top overall, 24 wide receiver. If you're going to be a top 24 wide receiver in fantasy, that is absolutely success because you're a starter every single week. I love how you guys like to reframe things just because you're pissed off that a player didn't play well. It's incredible how much copium I'm witnessing being inhaled. It's unbelievable. Cy Gotham says, should we be concerned about Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray, and Marvin usage? Going forward, if Kyler doesn't push the ball down the field, it will be a problem. It will be. But in this circumstance, I will blame it on the fact that it was the matchup going up against the Buffalo Bills secondary, which is great. It really, that offense, that defense, that secondary played extremely well. All right, let's see here. Moving on. For a guy with second-round draft capital, I expect more weekly. But look, that's your mistake. The fact that you drafted him in the second round is your issue, right? He's not worth a second-round pick. Like, therein lies the issue. You overdrafted a player that you expect more out of. If you overdraft him, then who's really, at fault in this circumstance, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like, that, and I understand, like, amongst the industry, that's where he was being drafted, but it doesn't mean that's correct, right? Let's see here. Abel says, player props for Mike Williams tomorrow, over 2.5 receptions, don't love it. I don't really want to deal with Mike Williams. I heard that he was probably going to be on a snap count tomorrow, a pitch count, so I'm not really too interested in that regard. Moving on. After we talked about that, we have the overall matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. One of the more surprising things, obviously, the Denver Broncos threw the ball for majority of that game. 12 targets for Cortland Sutton. Beautiful. Love to see it. Only 4 receptions. The quarterback's going to get better over time. Bo Nix will improve. Devon Vele. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his last name. 8 targets, 8 receptions, 39 receiving yards. Played the third most offensive snaps amongst all wide receivers and was, again, in the conversation in terms of overall routes ran with Sutton and Josh Reynolds, who are the number 1 and 2. Reynolds also had 8 targets. So if this team's going to continue to be in a situation in which they're, of course, continuing to throw the ball for majority of the games in negative game scripts, which they will be for the remainder of the season, these guys could benefit. And for fantasy purposes, could be of value going forward. Javonte and McLaughlin, they split about a 60-40 split in the backfield. Far too many touches for McLaughlin, in my opinion. Very worrisome for Javonte's value going forward. Very much so digging into his workload, mainly because McLaughlin is so much more dependable within the receiving game. Kenneth Walker left the game due to an oblique injury. He did say after the game that he's going to be fine. Zach Charbonnet may be a pickup in tomorrow's video, just in case. And of course, Tyler Lockett, like I mentioned earlier, he leads the team in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. What a ridiculous week, huh? Moving on to Dallas, and of course, we have the Cleveland Browns. Like I mentioned earlier, in regards to this matchup, Jake Ferguson and David Njoku injuries are the biggest pieces of note. If they're multi-week injuries, we will definitely be hitting the waiver wire for guys like Isaiah Likely and whatever else is potentially out there to acquire, which, again, there's not much. Zeke, obviously, out-snapping Dowdle 32-28, out-touching in terms of total overall opportunities, 12-9 in comparison to Dowdle, and being the goal line back. gives me more confidence in terms of ranking him going forward. As for the other side of the ball, again, until Watson gets an offensive line that can protect him, getting the ball down the field to Cooper and Judy is going to be difficult. But as of right now, again, if Njoku with this high ankle sprain is going to miss multiple weeks, Cooper and Judy will be of value, and enough to where, I mean, at least Cooper will continue to maintain his wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 2 value for fantasy, hopefully. 9 targets, again, is there. Difficult coverage against the Dallas Cowboys, which obviously he wasn't able to exactly find a lot of success in terms of the accuracy of those passes going in his direction. Jerome Ford, 57 of 76 overall snaps played, 75%, 19 total opportunities, 18 total touches. Pretty good week in terms of saving his week with a garbage time touchdown at the end. Speaking of garbage time touchdowns, let's close out the overall, per game conversation. Jaden Daniels scoring a garbage time touchdown at the end, beautiful. Scoring 2 rushing touchdowns is great. But obviously his favorite targets are Eckler, and Brian Robinson Jr. within the receiving game. So that definitely helps for those of you who went with a 0 RB strategy, maybe took Eckler as your RB2 in a full PPR league. He will have value going forward, but he will not have rushing upside. Only 2 rushing attempts from Eckler. Brian Robinson Jr. is pretty much kind of holding down that role and will hopefully not get so many rushing touchdowns stolen from him. Outside of that, McLaurin, again, a no-show. But all the receivers in this offense were no-shows. That's why they got blown out so badly. As for the Buccaneers, everybody played well. Would have loved to have seen, Rachaad White score a touchdown, but 7 catches for 75 yards gets the job done. Evans played well. Godwin played well. Baker played well. I mean, again, anybody who plays against Washington secondary is going to play well objectively. Okay, that covers that. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Let's go ahead and let's answer those right away in the live chat. Thank you very much for, of course, your patience and, of course, joining us this wonderful Sunday night of Week 1. Of course, Week 1's not over yet. We got tomorrow night. We've got a very, intense potential matchup here between the San Francisco 49ers and the Jets, but we'll have to wait and see how this transpires. Okay, we had a couple super chats sent in here. Just want to address them really quickly. The Real Franklin says, how are we feeling about Garrett tomorrow? Garrett Wilson better catch the ball 6 times tomorrow minimum. I got $1,000 on the line saying that he does. So we'll have to wait and see how that transpires. But again, the number one target of Aaron Rodgers should have himself a pretty good week, regardless of what defense they're playing against. Maurice Drake says, hey, my wide receiver core is in a half PPR consists of Tank Dell, Garrett Wilson, Cortland Sutton, with DeAndre Hopkins and Brian Thomas Jr. Am I screwed? My 2 QBs carried Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson. Are you in a super flex? If you're in a super flex format, you're in a good spot. But, Garrett Wilson and Brian Thomas Jr. are probably going to be your guys going forward. I mean, Tank Dell will be in that conversation, but the ups and downs will definitely hit on a consistent basis. Sergeant 212 says Watson's play hasn't been fantastic either. No, it hasn't. He's terrible. I'm gonna be straight up. I'm a fantasy guy. I won't speak to the idea that I know football front and back. I mean, I've played a lot of football. I've coached a lot of football in my life. But in terms of watching Watson, it makes me sick to my stomach to think how much better a guy like Joe Flacco is within that offense. And just Watson can't pull it. He can't get it done. Jeb Cohen says, my running backs are Christian McCaffrey, Pollard, and Javonte Williams. My wide receivers are Olave, Pittman, and Kirk. Okay, so I understand what you're going through, Jeb. I need to get rid of Williams, correct? Question mark. How about Pittman and Kirk? Get rid of? Look, here's the thing, guys. The issue is you can't get rid of these players. If you have a player that has a terrible week, trading them is not the answer. If you still want out on them, you need to wait until they have a productive performance, then try to sell them off of that. You can't just sell them on the low, because if you sell them on the low, you're getting pennies on the dollar, which again, in terms of the value that you utilize within a singular week, within your draft, to bring them onto your roster, you'd be doing yourself a huge disservice. Mustafa sends in a super chat, says, my matchup is coming down to a kicker. I currently have Zerline, but Moody is on the waiver. Which kicker should I start for tomorrow's game? If it's me, I'd probably rather have Moody, to be honest. Let's see here. Should I trade Stephon Diggs and David Montgomery for A.J. Brown and Jamar Chase? Yes, absolutely, without a doubt, Kane. I would do it right now, immediately. Send the offer, accept the offer, fire on all cylinders, yes. Let's see here. Rashee Rice for St. Brown? Yes. Give me St. Brown there. 10 times out of 10. Fam, should I trade Devontae Smith and Ramondre Stevenson for Saquon? Depends on what kind of depth you have a wide receiver. If you can survive with the loss of that, I don't mind the potential move. Gus says, who can I get for Godwin and Brian Robinson? I have Pacheco, Walker, Amon-Ra, Debo, Kelsey. You got a really strong team here. I think it's just a matter of like going and finding players that didn't play well. Like if you can you could probably figure out a way to trade Chris Godwin for Olave. You could. If that's something that you're interested in, you can make that move. Drake London's probably also available. I would assume, just the way that people are reacting to the lack of production. So I'm sure you can find a lot of potential trades, especially with even Brian Robinson. There was a lot of running backs that did not play, extremely well within, week one's overall bubble. But yeah, it's just go find a team that lost in your league. Like if you go find a team that lost major, like they got blown up by 50 points, they're probably pissed. You can go find someone on their team that they want to probably get rid of just because they're overreacting, and you just go and swoop. Not going to lie, I've done it on multiple occasions. It's the best way to trade after week one because people truly do start to panic, which again, they shouldn't. It's a marathon. Imagine you start anyway, I was going to make an analogy regardless. Moving on. Bernard says, Worthy versus Thomas Jr. moving forward in a full PPR flex. I think it depends on whether or not Marquise Hollywood Brown comes back sooner rather than later. The way I had it this offseason, I had Brian Thomas Jr. already ranked ahead of Worthy. I'm going to continue to keep it as such. Benjamin Duty says, Rachaad White, hold or sell? Thoughts on Swift? Okay, Rachaad White, hold or sell? I'm holding. I'm not too worried about Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving played a lot in that second half because, of course, he got himself in a game in which they were up 20 points. Of course, they're going to run the ball with a second-string running back. As for Swift, I'm going to hope that offense leans upon the running game more because 14 of 29 passing is not going to get the job done with Caleb, and I'm assuming they'll probably lean towards trying to run the ball more to protect their quarterback. As for selling Brian Thomas, I'm okay with that idea, but personally, I think you could probably get more out of him if you just keep him, assuming you need a wide receiver 3 of sorts going forward. I have Komet till Hawkinson is back. How much fab do I spend out of 100 for likely? 3-year viewer, much love. Okay, so the chances are you're going to probably have to spend a huge volume because really this week there isn't any other like major breakouts. Like last season, week 1, it was Kyron or Puka, and those guys were worth a lot. In this circumstance, for likely, out of 100, and I don't want to overspend, you might be looking down the barrel of like 25 to 30% of your fab, legitimately, because you're going to have to outbid the guy who has Mark Andrews, who may even be so upset, he may put 40 to 50% down. So you may be in enough trouble to where, unless you can compete with that volume, which again, I think it's way too much, because it's so early, there's so many more injuries that could potentially take place. I don't want to waste that 50% when I can have an opportunity at another player in which I may need to unload the entire clip for in case of an injury. So it's just a matter of like, how well do you know your league mates? How much do they spend that over? Like how much of a percentage of their fab do they typically like to spend? And understanding how much of a kind of panic that Mark Andrews manager is in, because they're going to potentially drop 50% for it. I'm almost positive. How do we feel about Waddle? I mean, shouldn't we feel great? I mean, I know he went to the injury tent earlier in that game, but he had a Waddle game. 109, 5 receptions, had himself a rushing attempt. I have no issues. He's always going to play second fiddle to Tyreek Hill. That's a given. But yeah, I'm not too concerned about it. Ibrahim says, down 13.5, half PPR. He has Debo, I have Hall, and Moody. Yeah, unless you're going to get a career game from Breece Hall, I think considering you're already down 13.5, you're going to need Moody to put up 14 points, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, but you're going to need like two or three 50-yard field goals, right? A couple PATs. And then you're just going to need Breece Hall to outproduce Debo, which in itself is definitely possible, but it's going to be difficult. Brian S. says, thoughts on Mike Gesicki? Unfortunate that he dropped that touchdown. Would have loved to have seen him score there. Ibrahim, that's a tough look, man. That's going to be a tough one to be able to overcome. Maurice Drake says, it's not super flex. Hopkins and Brian Thomas Jr. are my bench wide receivers. I have Kyler Murray as my bench quarterback. Should I trade him? Got offered T. Higgins and Lockett. Okay, so in this case, Maurice, let me go ahead and scroll back up just so that I have the context to the rest of your team. Where the heck is... Okay, hold up. Let's find this. Maurice Drake. Where the heck is the rest of your team for context? Maybe we look it up here. Is it not here? Okay, I gotta find your prior message then, Maurice, because at this point I've lost it. Okay, here we go. Hey, my wide receiver core in half PPR is Tank Dell, Garrett Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Hopkins, and Brian Thomas Jr. And my two QBs carried Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson. Okay, that's what confuses me. When you have two of those quarterbacks, that's what that's my immediate confusion as to why I believe it was a super flex. So considering it's not a super flex, and your backup quarterback is Kyler Murray, and you have Josh Allen and or Anthony Richardson, trading Kyler Murray is not a bad idea, especially if you're trading him to the team that has and just lost potentially Jordan Love. I think that could certainly work in your benefit there. Trading for T. Higgins, I usually don't like to trade for injured players. I don't know, man. That one's a little sketchy for me. Already injured in week 1. What a surprise, T. Higgins. What a surprise. All right, just going to answer a couple more questions, and then I'm going to call it a stream. Again, I appreciate you guys coming through. Greatly appreciate it. We've been here for about an hour 30, nearly. We'll be back tomorrow with a waiver wire episode. Alongside the waiver wire episode, I'll continue to, of course, live stream tomorrow night. Tuesday, running backs. Wednesday, wide receivers. Thursday, tight ends and quarterbacks. Friday, hidden gems. Saturday, stream. Sunday, stream. Again, I'm going to try to stream every day for the remainder of the season. So keep me responsible. Keep me in the comment sections. Let me know, Andrew, you better be streaming tonight, because I might get lazy one of these nights, but I'm gonna be good about it. Ronald sends in a super chat, says, do I sell high on Amon-Ra and trade him for empty what? And okay, all right, good one, Ronald. So I was like, first of all, sell high didn't make any sense. Then when you got to an empty bench spot and a bag of chips, I think it depends on what kind of chips we're talking, right? Like if we're talking about, those, I'm a big fan of Chex Mix. If we can get a nice bag of Chex Mix or popcorn chips, Amon-Ra might be on the table. No, I'm just kidding. How do we feel about Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs? Josh Jacobs looked good. Obviously, in the absence of Jordan Love, he's going to be struggling a little bit there, Gabriel. As for Derrick Henry, he will be better as we progress, primarily because, look, they play against the I think, no, they don't play against the Bengals. Who are they playing against? Ravens week 2. They play against the Raiders this week. They're going to run through the Raiders defense. And because it's going to be a game in which the Baltimore Ravens are going to be leading for majority of the game, because they're up in points rather than down 10, like how they were against Kansas City, which is a far more elite defense in comparison to Las Vegas. Because of that, Derrick Henry will get more touches. And with more touches, he'll continue to gain that rhythm, and he'll be a far better, more productive player within the given week. So not too worried about either of the two. The only concern I have with, Derrick Henry is in games in which they're losing, which again doesn't happen often, considering how good the Ravens are as a whole. And the only issue I have with Josh Jacobs, his touches were great. His burst looked good. It's just a matter of when do we get Jordan Love back. Let's see here. Sexy Pepsi 21 says, likely aside, who should I aim for tight end on the waivers? Great question. Let's go ahead and check. Again, tomorrow I will have an entire tight end section on my video. As for the top scoring tight ends who aren't rostered very much, right? Like Isaiah Likely, 28% rostered. Foster Moreau, 0%. Jawan Johnson, 3%. Let's see here. Chigoziem Okonkwo, 10%. Colby Parkinson, if in fact we're getting into a situation in which Puka Nacua is out for an extended time, Colby Parkinson might be the guy. Outside of that, we have the potential of, if in fact Jake Ferguson's going to miss a lot of time, I would look for the backup for the Dallas Cowboys. Tucker Kraft seems to have solidified himself as the number one for that team, for the Green Bay Packers, in comparison to Musgrave. Still don't love it. Jordan Akins is going to be replacing Njoku, but again, he's not going to get much opportunity. So really, outside of the potential of, you could still go after Mike Gesicki, but very much so touchdown dependent. It's going to be a matter of like, do we want Jawan Johnson, Colby? No, it's really just going to be Colby Parkinson. That's going to be the guy that we go after, especially if, in fact, Puka is going to miss, extended time going forward here. Okay, let's see here. After Sexy Pepsi, we had a couple questions here. Let me go ahead and read them. Scotty P says, bench Amari Cooper for Brian Thomas Jr. in the flex. We'll get there when we get there, depending on what... by the time I get to Wednesday, I'll have a better look at it. Still need to go watch these games back. Don't sell Godwin, Aiden. Yeah, Godwin played really well. And, I mean, he had a great matchup against Washington. We knew that he was going to play well. We knew that Mike Evans was going to play well because, again, Washington's terrible. So just wait till Neighbors plays well this week. Let's see here. Rowett says, thank you, Andrew. Because of Jake Ferguson injury, who do you pick up off the waivers? Juwan Johnson, Musgrave, Gesicki, Ertz, Dulcich, Kraft. Dulcich played a lot, didn't see enough targets. Kraft is better than Musgrave as it currently stands. Ertz, I don't even think Ertz did much, right? Control F. Let's see. Zach Ertz, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 28 yards. Don't love it, but I like the matchup next week. Yeah, again, not a lot of talent in week 1 in terms of potential pickups. Parkinson's disease, crying faces, Phil. Okay, dude. That's a good one. Let's see here. Drop Ferguson and take Likely if he's out for time. If Ferguson's going to miss time, you put him on your IR. Kirk looks washed, as in Kirk Cousins, potentially. I really think it was the offensive line that was the issue. Puka was crying. Highly doubtful that he plays next week. No, he's definitely not going to play next week. But we're just hoping he doesn't miss the season, man. I'm hoping it's something that's not severe, and they held him out just to be safe, like really just safe. King Josh says Likely. Yeah, Likely would be the pole position guy to be the number 1 waiver wire pickup potentially of this week. As for the next tight end on board, it's probably Parkinson. Now you're making me think of Parkinson's, man. Should I be upset that I drafted Gibbs over Saquon? By the time we get to week 8, we'll reevaluate that. As of right now, I think it's a little too early. Again, remember that there are going to be weeks where Saquon gets 3 of his touchdowns stolen by rushing touchdowns from Jalen Hurts. Just remember that is going to happen. So as long as we're all on the same page. You think KW3 is okay? I think he's okay, but just to be safe, it's probably a good idea to pick up Zach Charbonnet. Brian says, what offensive line? Exactly. All right, let's see here. Okay. I think that pretty much covers it, guys. Again, I'll be back tomorrow night after the Monday Night Football game. Prior to the Monday Night Football game, I will be posting a video in regards to waiver wire pickups for week 1, which I'm going to go work on right now in terms of collecting all the information that I need in regards to make the best overall suggestions. I do appreciate you guys coming through, supporting the channel on such a late hour. Again, do not overreact. Stay calm and roll with the punches because, again, it is a marathon. Tomorrow's Overreaction Monday, but we're going to be fine. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for coming out. I'm going to go ahead and cue the music, and I will be back tomorrow night. And until next time, I will see you guys. Peace. All right, Maurice Drakes just sent in a follow-up question. Maurice, I see you. Let me see if I can answer this. Says, my bad. It's a super flex. I didn't know what super flex meant. Okay, very well. We do start 2 quarterbacks and 3 wide receivers and 1 flex. Yeah, in a super flex format, you probably should keep your 3rd quarterback on roster. But again, if you're going to be able to trade Kyler for a lot of draft capital, it may be a pretty solid idea to go ahead and make that move. But in this circumstance, I'm thinking, if you're playing in a smaller league, 8, maybe 10 teams, that's why you have Anthony Richardson and Josh Allen. You could get away with the trade. But if it's a bigger league, like a 12-team format, which I doubt it is, because you have all three of those quarterbacks. So yeah, it's probably a smaller league. You probably get away with that deal. Sending them away. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we are interrupting this beautiful song for another super chat question that came in from Roy Shaver, who says, in a half PPR rank, these following waivers: Hubbard, Justice, Hill, McLaughlin, Dobbins, Madison. Out of the group, it's probably Dobbins 1, McLaughlin 2, Hubbard 3, Justice Hill 4, and Madison 5. Thank you very much, and good night.